There's an article in the New York Times from February of this year written by Chesa Boudin and Eric Fish. Chesa was the San Francisco district attorney for a couple of years during, I think, 2020 through like 2022 or 2023. And Eric Fish is a law professor at the University of California, Davis. And that article from February that they wrote together is called "A Grand Jury Will Indict a Ham Sandwich, Not in the Trump Era." I'm going to read it for you, and then we'll discuss why on earth we're talking about this article on day 41 of the Omer, which is Yahsod within Yahsod.
Shalom, Ani Miriam, and you are listening to Free People, a podcast by The Art of Yahweh.
Hi, I am Ishaya, and you are listening to Free People, a podcast by The Ark of Yahweh.
Hello. Hi, I'm Caleb. You are listening to Free People, a podcast by The Ark of Yahweh.
Grand juries are exercising their power to reject criminal charges in high-profile cases. In Washington, a grand jury refused to return a felony indictment against a man who threw a sandwich at a Customs and Border Protection officer during a crackdown ordered by President Trump. In Chicago, grand jurors have declined to indict in several felony cases stemming from a similar operation. Prosecutors seemed to get the message and dismissed additional charges. In Minnesota, federal prosecutors have charged some demonstrators with misdemeanors in cases involving encounters with federal agents, and it is very likely that they did so in some cases because the prosecutors expected grand juries would reject federal charges. Federal grand juries in Virginia twice decided not to indict Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, after a judge dismissed an initial case against her. Another federal grand jury in Virginia declined at least one charge against James Comey, the former FBI director. The prosecutor later improperly filed a version of the indictment the full grand jury never saw. This week, a grand jury rejected an effort by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington to indict the 6 members of Congress who appeared last year in a video underscoring the obligation of service members to refuse illegal orders. These no bills, which means the grand jury's refusal to indict, are encouraging. At a moment when the Trump administration is clearly trying to use the courts to suppress protest and seek revenge against perceived political enemies, the citizens who make up grand juries are rediscovering the institution's power and original purpose. These refusals are remarkable because they're so rare. Grand juries screen cases, but do not determine guilt or innocence. They decide only whether there is enough evidence for a case to move forward to trial. In our modern justice system, grand juries are extremely deferential to prosecutors. The adage that a prosecutor could get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich isn't colorful rhetoric, but statistical reality. In 2016, the last year for which the Justice Department published such data, federal prosecutors concluded more than 155,000 cases, but grand juries refused to indict in only 6 of them. Yet, in recent months, we've seen grand juries asserting themselves as meaningful checks on prosecutorial overreach, particularly in cases stemming from Mr. Trump's deployment of federal forces against protesters. This is how grand juries were meant to work. The Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren once described grand juries as, quote, a primary security to the innocent against hasty, malicious, and oppressive persecution, end quote. John Jay, our first Chief Justice, called them, quote, one of the best institutions that ever was devised for bringing offenders to justice without endangering the peace and the security of the innocent, end quote. Colonial grand juries often refused to enforce British revenue and sedation laws, including the infamous Stamp Act. The Constitution's framers enshrined the power of grand juries in the Fifth Amendment. They viewed grand juries not just as criminal case screeners, but as a bulwark against oppressive government. As our criminal justice system expanded over the years, grand juries transformed into essentially rubber stamps. Why do grand juries today nearly always bless whatever prosecutors place before them? The answer lies in procedure. As we wrote in a recent law review article, many jurisdictions deny grand juries the tools they need for meaningful review. Federal grand juries are a prime example. They typically operate in secret with no judge or defense lawyer present. They usually hear only from the prosecutor and whatever witnesses the prosecutor chooses to call. Federal prosecutors can present hearsay testimony and even illegally obtained evidence that would never be allowed at trial. A federal prosecutor can simply have an agent read from an arrest report rather than bringing in actual eyewitnesses. And because the proceedings remain secret, after the fact judicial review is close to impossible. By contrast, some states have adopted robust grand jury procedures. California, for instance, prohibits most hearsay testimony before grand juries and allows defendants to challenge indictments afterward. What we're seeing now suggests that even procedurally hobbled federal grand juries can reclaim their historic function when circumstances demand it. The recent string of no bills suggests that grand jurors, everyday Americans performing a civic duty, are recognizing the administration's penchant for prosecutorial overreach and refusing to participate in it. They're acting as the conscience of the community, rejecting efforts to suppress political dissent. The Washington sandwich thrower and the protesters in Chicago weren't dangerous criminals. It's clear that they were overwhelmingly citizens targeted by an administration that is deploying federal forces as domestic shock troops. Grand jurors apparently see through this and are increasingly saying no. Similarly, the cases involving Miss James and the 6 members of Congress reflect grand jurors doing their job, screening out weak and obviously politically motivated charges that never should have been brought. If grand juries are exercising their power even within broken procedures, imagine what they could do with proper tools. At the federal level and in many states, we need procedural reform to limit hearsay testimony so grand jurors hear from actual witnesses, to create remedies when illegally obtained evidence is presented so constitutional violations have consequences for prosecutors, to require presentation of exculpatory evidence, which means evidence that favors the defense, at the grand jury stage before cases get to trial, and to provide transcripts allowing trial judges to review indictments and ensure that they were properly obtained. These reforms wouldn't hamper legitimate prosecutions. They would strengthen public confidence in the criminal justice system by ensuring that indictments are well supported. And they would help limit pretextual prosecutions of adversaries and dissenters. Federal grand jurors are showing that they will use their power wisely. We should embrace this trend and give them the procedural protections they need to serve as true checks on government power. Beloved, this article about grand jurors is the perfect way to describe what Yahsod within Yahsod is all about. Because when we combine these two attributes, the question that we ask ourselves is, what is the foundation of the foundation? I want to teach about something that may be new to some of you, so let me take a few minutes at the beginning to explain where we are and what we're doing. Some of this will be familiar to those who have learned this material before, and I ask your patience. We have new faces here tonight, and I want everyone in the room to know what we're talking about and to be able to follow. We are in the middle of a season called Counting the Omer. The Torah instructs us in the book of Vayikra or Leviticus to count 49 days between Passover and the festival of Shavuot. Passover is the festival that remembers when our ancestors came out of slavery in Egypt. And Shavuot is the festival that remembers when they stood at the foot of Mount Sinai and received the Torah from Yahweh. The 49 days that fall between those two festivals are the days of preparation. They are the spiritual journey that takes a people from freedom into revelation. They are the days that teach the people of Israel how to remove the stain of Egypt, the stain of bondage from them, and to introduce and build their vessels into being characters of people that are quite literally in the image and likeness of the creator of the universe. We are calling this season 3 for the Ark of Yahweh, of this journey, free people, because what we're getting at is to be a free people has nothing to do with physical bondage and has everything to do with being attached to the tree of life, being attached to Father Yahweh, being attached to a discipline that says you, with your freedom, should behave in a certain way, should, you yourself should become in the image of a character of the Almighty One. And every year we walk that journey again in real time by counting each day out loud as evening falls. A tradition developed among our forefathers many centuries ago that gave each of these 49 days a particular spiritual quality. They taught that there are 7 core qualities that flow from Yahweh into the created world. Again, what does it mean to be built in the image and likeness of Yahweh as we see in Genesis or Bereshit? Well, that's where we learn these 7 qualities, right? These qualities are sometimes called the Sephirot, and you can think of them as 7 different ways that the presence of Yahweh reaches us here below. There's kindness, which we call chesed. There's strength and restraint, which we call Gevorah. There's harmony and beauty, which we call Tiferet. There's endurance, which we call Netzach. There's humility and gratitude and prayer and praise, which we call Hod. There's foundation, which is the week we're in this week, which is Yahsod. And there is the manifestation of all of that, which is called Malkut. These 7 qualities are spread across 7 weeks of the Omer counting. The first week is the week of Chesed. The second week is the week of Gevorah, and so on through all 7 weeks. Within each week, the 7 days each correspond to one of the same 7 qualities. So every day of the Omer carries 2 labels. There is a quality of each week, and there is a quality of the day within that week. This pattern lets each day be a meditation on how one quality lives inside another quality. Well, tonight is day 41. We are in the 6th week, which is the week of Yahsod, the week of foundation. Within this week, tonight is the 6th day, which is also the day of Yahsod. So it is a Twofer, as Rabia, my father, would say. Tonight we call Yahsod within Yahsod, or in Hebrew, Yahsod Shebe Yahsod, which translates as foundation within foundation. Tonight is the night we count the part of the foundation that is itself the deepest foundation underneath everything else. So now that we've got that out of the way, I want to get back to that question that was just asked. What is the foundation of the foundation? And I want us to ask what it means for a society to have a foundation at all. And I want to look honestly at what happens when that foundation breaks. Let me explain what foundation means in this tradition, because the word is doing a lot of work. Yahsod doesn't mean foundation as in the basement of a building. Yahsod is the channel through which everything above continues to reach everything below. It is the seam that joins heaven to earth. It is what makes spiritual realities actually arrive in the physical world where we live. Without Yahsod, the higher things stay up there and we never feel them down here. You can picture it this way. Imagine a river that runs down a mountain into the valley where you live. That river is what makes the valley a place where life is possible. If the river dries up, or if someone diverts it upstream, the valley doesn't collapse all at once. It just simply slowly stops being green. The crops fail, the animals leave, people move away. The valley does not die in a single dramatic moment. It dies because the river that fed it is gone. Well, Yahsod is the river. The 7 qualities of Yahweh, the 7 attributes of Yahweh, the 7 characteristics of Yahweh, they flow down through that river into our world. When the river is open, the world flourishes. When the river is broken, the world, again, does not crash dramatically. It just quietly stops being able to stand. That world standing is going to matter in a few minutes. I just want you to hold on to this concept. Now let's talk about the Mishnah, right? What is the Mishnah? Well, Yahsod within Yahsod, the foundation of the foundation, again, is the deepest part of that river. It is the bedrock that the riverbed itself sits on. Tonight we ask, and we are asking, what that bedrock is actually made of. And to answer that question, we need to turn to a very short but famous teaching from a collection of Israeli Jewish wisdom called the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the earliest written collection of Jewish teachings outside of the Torah itself. It was put into writing around the year 200 of the Common Era, and it gathers together teachings that had been passed down orally for centuries before that. One book within the Mishnah is called Pirkei Avot, which means Ethics of Our Fathers. It is a collection of short ethical teachings from the great teachers of the Second Temple period and the centuries that followed. In the first chapter of Pirkei Avot, there is a teaching from a sage, and he says the following: the world stands on 3 things: on justice, on truth, and on shalom. The Hebrew short of this powerful saying includes a word called omed. Omed is a verb, and it means, again, stands. Stands is not saying something's being built. Stands is not saying it used to exist. It's not mentioning something of the past. It is saying stands, as in right now in this present moment. The world is standing on 3 things: on justice, on truth, and on shalom, or commonly peace, but we know it means way more than that. And if you pull any of those 3 things out, the standing stops. After we see these three pillars, we see where that comes from, as in all of the things in the Mishnah, all of the things in Parkei Avot, they come from text in the Torah. They're not made up out of the sky. So where does that come from? It comes from a prophet named Zechariah. In chapter 8, verse 16, we see him say, "Truth and the judgment of shalom shall you judge in your gates." Okay, I want us to notice the last phrase especially, in your gates. The Hebrew word for gates, right, is sha'ar. Sha'arim is a plural, is singular. The plural is sha'ar. I've mentioned this before. In the ancient world, the gate of the city was not the doorway in a wall. The gate was the place where public life happened. It's where the elders of the community sat at the gate, meaning it's where the judges held court, right? It's where two people that had a dispute, they brought it to the gate, as in the court. When someone was accused of a crime, the trial happened at the gate. The gate was the courthouse. The gate was the city hall. The gate was the public square of the ancient world. So think of all of those things being combined into one place. So when Zechariah instructs us to judge truth in our gates, he is talking about something very specific. He is talking about the moment when a community has to decide whether one of its members has done something wrong. He is talking about the procedure by which an accusation either becomes a verdict or does not. He is talking about, in modern terms, the justice system. And so the world rests on these three pillars and the place where those pillars actually meet. The ground is the gate, the courthouse, the room where one person decides the fate of another person. If the gate is functioning, the pillars hold up the world. If the gate is broken, the pillars have nothing to rest on and the world stops standing. That is the connection to Yahsod, because Yahsod is the foundation. The gate is the place where the foundation actually meets the ground. And Yahsod within Yahsod is the day we ask whether our gate is still working, beloved. I want to pause for one more observation about this Mishnah because it has a curious feature. This is the second time, actually, in the very first chapter of Parkei Avot that someone says that the world stands on three things. Earlier in the same chapter, a much older, wise person named Shimon HaSadik has also said the world stands on three things, but he named three different things. He named Torah, service to Yahweh, and acts of loving kindness. So we have two different teachings that both begin with the same Hebrew phrase about what the world stands on and naming three things. Why are they different? Well, the traditional answer to this puzzle, because everything in Hebraic thought is a puzzle, is that the two teachings are talking about two different kinds of foundation. In one, it is talking about the world was built upon three things, as in the world was built upon when Yahweh created it. The foundation is built upon Torah, service to Yahweh, and loving kindness. Meaning that foundation is eternal and permanent and will never change. It cannot change. They are the cosmic reasons why creation was worth bringing into existence. They were laid in place at the beginning and they do not need to be rebuilt. In the other, it is talking about something different. It is talking about what keeps the world running day to day. That is kind of what you would think about as the civic foundation, the social foundation, the reasons a community of human beings stays together and functions over time. And that one, it says justice, truth, and shalom. And they're not built once and then left alone. They have to be rebuilt by every generation, in every gate, by every person who passes through them. If we stop maintaining this civic foundation, the world stops standing, even though the cosmic foundation underneath it is still firmly in place. I hope this makes sense, beloved. But this is why Yahsod within Yahsod matters eternally and civically. The cosmic foundation is taken care of from above. That's Father Yahweh. The civic foundation is our job. And tonight is the night we ask how our job is doing. Well, if you think about what I read at the jump, that article in the New York Times, I'd say things are shaky. Things are shaky because things are being tested at great lengths. But we do see people stepping up to the task. We do see people using the formula from this day of Yahsod within Yahsod to refuse things, to say no, to say, I will not be complicit in that corruption, to say, I have the power to refuse, I have the power to reject, I have the power not to participate in something that I deem corrupt and rotten at its core. I have the power to use my eyes to see and my ears to hear. So it's working, albeit shaky in certain areas, but people are in an unprecedented way, in a way that we've never experienced in 250 years of the United States that have ever happened. If we have seen more people reject corrupt prosecutions than ever before, then we know that something's being tested, beloved. But where do we see this in the Torah? Who can we look at as a model? Well, when we want to learn about what civic foundation actually looks like in real human life, in Hebraic thought, we can see the answer as the life of Yosef. Yosef, or Joseph, is the son of Yaakov, the same Yaakov whose other name is Israel. And Yosef is one of the 12 sons of Yaakov who will eventually become the 12 tribes. His story takes up the last quarter of the book of Bereshit, or Genesis. And if you've not read it recently, I encourage you to go home and read it either tonight or tomorrow morning or at some point in the day. It's chapters 37 through 50. And read it in a single sitting because it is one of the most powerful stretches of narrative in the whole Torah. In Hebraic thought, Yosef is who we associate with the Sephirah of Yahsod, meaning Yosef is the foundation. He is the Yahsod figure in Israel's family history. He is Yosef, Ha-Sadiq, Yosef, the righteous one. But that title is not given to him casually. The Torah does not call people righteous lightly. Yosef earns that title in a very specific moment, and that moment teaches us what Yahsod actually is. So let me set the scene for those of you who do not know the account well. Yosef is 17 years old. His older brothers hate him, literally hate him, partly because their father favors him, and partly because Yosef has really acted a bit in a conceited and childish way about telling them about dreams that he had in which they all bow down to him. Okay, yeah, you can see how this plays out. So one day when Yosef goes out to check on his brothers who are tending sheep far from home, the brothers decide to act on their hatred. They throw him into a pit, then pull him out and sell him in a passing caravan of traders. The traders carry him down to Egypt, or Mitzrayim, where they sell him as a slave in the household of a wealthy Egyptian official named Potiphar. Yosef is now 17 years old, alone in a foreign country, a slave with no rights, no family, no money, and no way home. He does not speak the language. He doesn't know the customs. He's not been in this setting before. He's been essentially betrayed by his family, by his brothers. By any normal measure, his life is finished. Dunzo. KO. But what happens next is extraordinary. Yosef could have become bitter, but he doesn't. He could have become passive, but he doesn't. He works. He works so well that Potiphar promotes him and promotes him again until eventually Potiphar puts Yosef in charge of the entire household. The Torah text tells us that Yahweh was with Yosef and that everything Yosef put his hands to prospered. Within a few years, this Hebrew slave boy is effectively running the affairs of one of the most powerful men in Egypt. Now we come to the moment that earns Yosef his title. This is Bereshit chapter 39, verses 7 through 9. Potiphar has a wife. Torah does not give us her name in tradition of Hebraic thought. It's simply, we refer to her as Potiphar's wife, right? The wife of Potiphar. But she notices Yosef, who by this point has grown into a handsome young man, and she begins to pursue him. Torah tells us that she comes to him day after day, asking him to lie with her. Meaning it's not a simple moment of temptation. It is a repeated temptation over and over and over. This is a sustained campaign of pressure. And we see what happens over what appears to be a long period of time from a powerful woman who could have Yosef punished or killed if he displeases her. Well, we see that Yosef doesn't acquiesce, doesn't say yes to this pursuit by this powerful woman. Think of the first lady of the president of the United States doing this. Okay, now we can maybe get it in today's terms. Well, Yosef doesn't acquiesce. He refuses. Every day she asks, and every day he says no. Then one day she catches him alone in the house, alone with no other servants present. And she grabs him by his garment and demands that he lie with her right then, as in, have sex with me now. Yosef pulls away. He says, chill. But when he pulls away, he leaves the garment in her hand, meaning it rips, right? He refuses. He runs out the house. He refuses and runs out the house. He doesn't say, I'm afraid of getting caught. He doesn't say, I don't want to. He says, how can I do this great evil and sin against Yahweh? He locates the issue at its highest possible level. He refuses because the act itself would be a violation of his relationship with the Almighty One of his fathers, Yahweh. This is the moment. This is why he is called Yosef Hasadik, Yosef, the righteous one. If you get what I'm putting down here, he's called Yosef, the righteous one, not because he's portrayed beautifully, and not because he gave to the poor, not because he did something that's so beautiful. It's because he said no. It's because he refused. It's because when corruption was offered to him, with no human witness to hold him accountable, and every worldly reason to give in, yet he said no. This is what I want you to hold as a thought, because it is the heart of what Yahsod actually means. Yahsod is not a worldly foundation. Yahsod is specifically the foundation that comes from knowing what you will not do in Yahweh's name. Yahsod is connected to the covenant. Everything that we think about when we think about the Mount Sinai revelation, when we wake up and connect to the tree of life, when we wake up and connect to the promises that Yahweh gave us through Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, which we see in action through this channel, Yahsod, through Yosef. This is the bris. This is the berit. This is the sign of the covenant. It is a promise. It is a sealing of what one will and will not do. A person whose Yahsod is strong is a person who actually holds. It is a person whose commitments are firm, whose no actually means no. The power to reject, the power to say no when consent would mean I'm going to be mixed up in this corruption if I say yes. That's what Yahsod is. That is what Yosef does in Potiphar's house. That is what makes him a Sadiq. And tonight on Yahsod within Yahsod, that is what we are counting. The foundation of the foundation is the power to reject. It is the power of refusal. Now, we are going to stop here tonight. I'm leaving you all, I think for the first time in the history of this podcast, on a cliffhanger. And tomorrow, we will continue to understand what this looks like as we look at the next stages of the story, the next stages of what I'm getting at here. But the power to reject is so phenomenal, so essential, and so foundational that I don't think I can cover it in one day, beloved. So I hope you all join us tomorrow to continue this. And in the meantime, think about today what saying no means, what refusing means. Think about the power to reject something that Hasatan puts in your ear, to reject something that Hasatan is tempting you with. What does that mean? What does that look like? Make a list of things that you've said no to Hasatan whispering in your ear about. Make a list of things in the world that you've said no to that don't match the mitzvot of Father Yahweh, the instructions, the guidelines, and teachings of this faith system. And then ponder how you respond after that no might mean punishment, because that's what we're going to see as a prelude as we continue this account tomorrow. Shalom, friends.
Today is day 41 of the Omer. If you were able to join us last night for both the blessing and the prayer, then we invite you to join us tonight for both the blessing and the prayer. However, if you weren't able to say the prayer last night, then we invite you to join us tonight for just the prayer. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al seferat ha'omer. Blessed are you, Father Yahweh, King and ruler of the universe, who has set us apart with his mitzvot and commanded us concerning the counting of the Omer. Today is 41 days, which is 5 weeks and 6 days of the Omer. May the merciful one restore unto us the service of the Bet HaMikdash to its place, speedily in our days. Amen. Selah. For the choir master, a song with instrumental music, a psalm. May Yahweh be favorable to us and bless us. May he make his countenance shine upon us forever. That your way be known on earth, your salvation among all nations. The nations will extol you, O Yahweh. All the nations will extol you. The nations will rejoice and sing for joy. For you will judge the peoples justly and guide the nations on earth forever. The peoples will extol you, O Yahweh. All the peoples will extol you. For the earth will have yielded its produce, and Yahweh our Almighty One will bless us. Yahweh will bless us, and all from the farthest corners of the earth shall fear him. We implore you by the great power of your right hand, release the captive, accept the prayer of your people, strengthen us, purify us, Yahsod One. Mighty One, we beseech you, guard as the apple of the eye those who seek your oneness. Bless them, cleanse them, bestow upon them forever your merciful kadoshness. Powerful, set apart one, in your abounding goodness, guide your congregation. Only an exalted one, turn to your people who are mindful of your kadoshness. Accept our supplication and hear our cry, you who know secret thoughts. Blessed be the name of the esteem of his kingdom, forever and ever. Master of the universe, you have commanded us through Moshe, your servant, to count Sefirat HaOmer, in order to purify us from our evil and uncleanness. As you have written in your Torah, you shall count for yourselves from the day following the day of rest, from the day on which you bring the Omer as a wave offering. The counting shall be for 7 full weeks. Until the day following the 7th week shall you count 50 days, so that the souls of your people Israel may be cleansed from their defilement. Therefore, may it be your will, Yahweh our mighty one and the mighty one of our scriptural forefathers, that in the merit of the Sefirat HaOmer, which I counted today, the blemish that I have caused in the Sephirah Yahsod Shebe Yahsod, be rectified, and I may be purified and set apart with supernal kadoshness. May abundant bounty thereby be bestowed upon all the worlds. May it rectify our nefesh, ruach, and neshama from every baseness and defect, and may it purify and set us apart with your supernal kadoshness. Amen. Selah.